All right. Hello, and thank you all for coming. I appreciate you taking the time. So let's see here. Okay, I do believe everybody who is supposed to be here has shown up. So let's start. We've all got busy lives, and that you showed up shows me that you really care for your cat. So thank you very much for that, and I will deliver for you today. So now what is this presentation about? Well, most people either never really think about traveling with a cat and then are really surprised about what is happening, or they are so afraid of it that they never do it at all. So we wanted to address both of this. And we will also share some bonus, a bonus PDF with some best practices after the call, just to make it a little bit easier for you. So a bit of background about me. My first cat I got in London. He was abandoned by one of the neighbors, so I took him on. And then about 4 or 5 years later, and then I got another cat with him, which was Chin Chin. That was about 20 years ago. And we then moved to Wiltshire in 2005, so 5 years later. And then unfortunately, in Wiltshire, we went to a very small farm. Well, actually, not the farm wasn't actually that small, but there was only one road around. It was about 100 meters away, and we came from a busy London street. And I didn't think that there could be any danger because my first cat, Carter, had survived that busy street for 5 years. And we moved to the farm, and I made sure that we parked. And we went to a place that was as far away from the street as possible, about 100 meters, again, 100 yards. And he got run over on that street. So that was really heartbreaking. Apparently, if a cat never sees these cars that it sees usually on the busy street, then it didn't really take the street seriously. And there was maybe 1 or 2 cars a day, maybe 2 or 3. And unfortunately, so that was the first time when I thought, okay, I'm going to really have to do something to make sure that next time this doesn't happen again when I move, that my cats are really safe. So Chin Chin was distraught. So I got Jerry and Gizmo for her, 2 little kittens, which you may have seen in the presentation before. And they bonded really well. So that was really lovely. The only problem was that I was about to move to Canada, and I didn't have a place in Canada yet. So I ended up in a hotel and made sure that I ended up in a hotel where I could take cats with me. And it turned out to be a really, really good hotel. Of course, it was also a very expensive hotel, which I didn't know. It was the Marriott in Vancouver, a 5-star hotel. And the only reason I had a really good deal was that they had a really good deal at the time. But if I had stayed longer than the 3 weeks that I had booked, it would have gotten really expensive. But within the 3 weeks, I got an apartment, so flat. And we moved into the flat, and I made sure that they were safe there. And I made sure that I got the right flat for them to be safe. And then we lived there for 1.5 years. And then for personal reasons, we went back to London again. I ended up in a hotel again. I was supposed to have my caravan, but somebody decided it wasn't convenient to give my own caravan to me, and she just kept it. So we ended up in a hotel in London for 3 weeks, which was also lovely. It was in Kensington. It was the only hotel I could find that would actually take cats. And then from there, we went to Hounslow, a small flat where the cats couldn't go outside. And I had the good fortune of entertaining my cats at night while I was working at a very busy job during the day. And after half a year, I thought, okay, this cannot go on. And I bought a house in Sandhurst, a little bit away from London. And we moved here, and we lived here ever since. But on occasion, we also still traveled in a caravan. So I have a lot of experience traveling with cats, both by car and by plane and in a caravan and so on and so forth. And I've learned a few things. So you may have seen in the presentation how my first experience of flying to Vancouver was with my cats. So I had Chin Chin in the box. And I didn't think anything about it because we had driven to the vet before, but it was only 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, after 10 or 15 minutes, she started to freak out completely. Right? And I was freaking out because I didn't know what to do with a cat, and she was, I mean, I thought she was going to get a heart attack. So I reached over and I opened the little door, and there was Chin Chin coming out, and she jumped on my lap, and then she looked out the window, and then she honked the horn at everybody because she was standing like this. And then I looked out the window, and I couldn't see anything because she was standing in front of me. And then she went up on the dashboard, and I couldn't see anything. It was on the motorway, right? So I'm pushing her out and down again on the other side. And she's going to the window and she's standing on this little button on the window, and the window rolls down on the motorway. So I was going totally crazy. So, and I had to pull over and calm her down first. So I learned from that experience that there are a few things that you should probably do when you're traveling with a cat. And maybe a few things to prepare. But first things first. So one of the first things that is really important if you travel with a cat, and I'll put the slides up now and let me take a look if I can share these with you. Okay. Right. Let me go here. Hold on. Doing this for the first time here on this particular program. So where are we on the call? Here we go. Okay, share. Here we go. Sharing. Yeah, and I will put this to the proper slideshow. So okay, so here we go. I hope that you can see this now. So okay, so Idiot's Guides to Traveling to Live, Travel, Move, and Bond with Cats. So how do you bond with cats? So why do you need to bond with cats? Well, one of the first things that you need to do in order to be able to travel well, and in order to be able to move with them later, is to bond with them. And you would want to do this anyway. So a lot of people think that you cannot bond with a cat like with a dog, but it is so not true. I love both cats and dogs. There are people like us out there. And I get along with dogs incredibly well, so well that my landlady actually left her dogs with me for a month when she went to Uganda, and the dogs were perfectly fine. But my cat, when I left her with my family, she was not fine at all. I was an exchange student. I was going to America and I came back afterwards, but she ran around for 6 months in the house and she ate and ate and ate, and she was looking for me and she was meowing. And only after 6 months it stopped. But then I came back and she never let me touch her again. So cats bond to people just as much as dogs do. They just express it in a different way. So how do you bond with a cat? So the first thing is cats need to be wooed and charmed. You cannot treat cats like a dog. Cats are not dogs. If you treat them the same, you will not get the same results. You know, you can shout at dogs, for example, and you can do all kinds of things with dogs. But if you do them with cats, then especially in the beginning, they're going to go away. So what you basically have to do is you have to treat them, you know, like a man used to treat a woman. You have to woo them. Nowadays, that's a little bit of a problem with political correctness and everything. But, you know, like it used to be, you have to kind of wait until she comes to you, and you can kind of sit there and, you know, give her a little bit of space, and then maybe come a little bit closer, and then a little bit closer again, and then you give her a little bit of food maybe. And after a while, she will come to you, and she will be just as loving as any dog could be. I know in my childhood, when I was sad, my cat would always come and comfort me. It was a beautiful relationship. So you can bond with a cat. So cats bond deeply with humans, very deeply, but they also bond with other animals and their surroundings. Only because they're sitting around and they pretend not to notice you doesn't mean that they don't notice you. I'm not sure if you know about the theory about how people perceive things. So it's about, you know, some people perceive more through the eyes, some people more through the ears, and some people are more kinesthetic. So cats are kinesthetic. They feel. They can see you even if you're not so far away from it, even if you're, you know, next to them and you're not looking, and they're not looking at you. So if you look at a farm, for example, you will see that cats will sit next to each other, and they don't look at each other, but they will always be at a certain distance from each other where they're comfortable. So they feel each other, and they will feel you as well. And cats are not loners. They just express and bond differently than dogs. So be aware when rehoming and moving, they will grieve for the old home, but they will also grieve for you. So don't leave them where they are, just thinking that you don't want them to grieve for their home, because they will grieve even more for you if you're bonded with them properly. Now, as I said, cats are not dogs. So don't try the old school approach to dogs. You may get away with dogs. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend punishing dogs. it is not something that is necessary. I've always been able to train dogs and make sure that dogs do what I want them to do, simply because they love me, so they are trying to please me. That is how I get a dog to do what I want her to do. And they always come to me. And a lot of times I find it when I deal with owners who have dogs and who have punished them in order to train them, that if I work with the dog actually listens better to me, even after a very short period of time, because they know that if they come to me, they're not being punished, but they're being loved, and that is what they want. And that is even more important with cats. Now, if you don't do that, if you start punishing them, and if you start, trying to treat them like dogs, they will either leave or they will never trust you again. So this is not the way to bond with a cat. And just with dogs, positive reinforcement is just as much effective than discipline, even more effective than discipline. So if you want to look it up on the internet, it's called clicker treatment. That is what they use in zoos nowadays as well for all kinds of other animals. And that is very, very effective. And with cats, it's basically the only way that you can bond. I had an example once where I stayed in a B&B and they told me that the cat was totally aloof and wouldn't come in, and they didn't understand why, because they were feeding her, and I went outside and the cat almost immediately jumped on my lap and was fine with me, and they were totally surprised and they didn't know why. And then I didn't know what was going on in that household, so I came back, and then the man came home, and the man was a prison guard. And he didn't like the cat much. And the first thing he basically stomped onto the ground, where the cat is basically sitting, with her tail and everything, and shouted loudly, and then the cat ran out. And then they were wondering why the cat didn't bond to them. She was afraid of them. And they didn't understand the behavior of the cat either. She was playing with the other cat, and they thought, from one of the neighbors, and they thought that they were fighting. They weren't fighting, they were just play fighting. So you really need to understand cat behavior as well, and spend a little bit of time just observing and maybe looking at, how cats usually act, to understand what they're actually doing, because otherwise you will not treat her the right way. So, and one of the best things is to avoid loud noises, especially in the first bonding phase, because they get really scared by loud noises. Now, traveling with your cat. Now, every cat is different. Some enjoy it, some get hysterical, like Chin Chin did. But if your cat panics in a car, start it slow and give her positive reinforcement. And what I mean with that is not on the day. What I mean with that is train her. So how I trained Chin Chin, who was obviously really distressed, was that I first, let me stop the share for a minute, that I first basically just put her into the car with some treats. And then she got all over the place, and I started just stroking her and talking to her and giving her the treats, and she calmed down. And I only did this for a few minutes, and then I brought her back in again. The next day I did the same again. The next day I did the same again. And then she learned that if she went in there, she got her favorite treat. So she was kind of okay with it. But I didn't take the other cats with me. It was just this one cat that I took in, just Chin Chin. And then I started driving around the block once, and she started getting panicky again, but then she got a treat again, and then she was fine. And I did that a few times. And then I started with the other cat. I put one of the other cats in, who was also a little bit nervous, and did the same thing with him. He was a little bit better. And then I put them together. The problem is, if you do this with both cats at once, is that they will probably freak out, because they're going to freak each other out. So you need to do one at a time. There can be exceptions. The first time when I traveled with to Vancouver, I actually put, because Chin Chin was so upset, I put Gizmo in with Chin Chin into the same box, and Gizmo actually calmed her down. So she then snuggled up to Gizmo, and then they were fine. But sometimes you got to be careful with that. It really depends on the cats. If they are used to each other, that is a great way for them to travel. If you can get a bigger box and get the airline to allow it, you will probably have to tell them that they are, sister and brother, or mother and son, or something like that. But only do that if the cats really do get along well, because otherwise they may kill each other in that cage. So you really need to know your animals. Where was I? So I did this with Chin Chin and Gizmo, you know, first just standing, and put them together in there and gave them treats and calmed them down. And then I would drive around with them around the block. Then I would drive a little bit further. And then by the time that I was actually traveling, they were actually fine. They weren't particularly happy, but they were actually fine. And it was a long travel. It was 12, I think it was actually 16 hours, because I drove from England to Europe, to Germany, and through the through the Eurotunnel, which is brilliant, by the way, because you can keep your cats in the car with you and you don't have to take them out. So that was a really good experience. And, you know, every time if they did get a little bit upset, then I would go to a parking place and I would calm them down again and give them something and give them a little bit of love, and then I would drive on. So just be careful that you don't ignore them. Be aware of their emotional well-being and give them a little bit of love every time when they get upset, and then they'll be fine. Jerry was always fine anyway. I can actually take her somewhere to Wiltshire where we used to live and take her out for a walk. And I can even take her off the lead, and I can walk her on a lead, and I can take her off a lead. I would not have done that with Chin Chin, but with Jerry, that's absolutely fine. So it really depends on the cat, how these things work out. So the next thing, right. Next thing, traveling with cats abroad. Now, there are a few things that you need to be aware of in advance. And that is one, that you need to be aware of what kind of vaccinations and so on and so forth you need. So let me share this again. Here we go. Current slide. There you go. So check with the vet in advance what vaccinations need to be needed, and if possible, check it 6 months in advance, because for some things like rabies, for example, sometimes you need to get a rabies, at least it used to be that way, that you needed to get a rabies shot, and then you had to wait for 6 months and then get a blood test to check if the shot had actually taken. I think nowadays it's 4 months, but it could be several months before you can actually travel, otherwise you can't bring a cat back. And that can be unfortunate because it has happened to me. I ended up in Canada, and then I wanted to go back to London, and then it turns out that the vet in London had made a mistake with the vaccination. And I had to stay half a year longer in Canada than I actually wanted. I had to find a job and everything because I couldn't take my cat back. So really be careful that you know exactly what they need. And the next thing is check with the hotel, with a caravan site, or wherever you take the cats, that they're actually okay with it. Don't just assume that they will allow you to do it, because otherwise you may just have to move on. Also check with the airlines what travel arrangements they have. Every airline is a little bit different, and some of the airlines are really brilliant. Like in London and Heathrow, the cats are being brought to a silent room where they are going to be okay. And in Vancouver, it wasn't so brilliant because they ended up standing on the landing field where the planes were basically taking off, and I totally freaked out, so I should have checked that before. But in something like Heathrow, for example, it was really brilliant. I think I went with, I'm not sure which airline I went with, but it was one of the big ones, and it was really good. So check what arrangements they have and how big the cages have to be as well, because I had to get huge cages. It was a 10-hour flight, so I had to get huge cages for them. What I also did is that I put a big enough cage so the cat could lie down, or both cats could lie down, and there was a little litter box. And I made that little litter box out of, I think I made it out of cardboard at the time, and made sure that litter box was at the end of the cage. So in a 10-hour flight, they didn't have to soil themselves, but could go into that litter box. And that was really helpful to make them more comfortable during the journey. Now, in a hotel, bring your own cat litter box and accessories, because they may not have any in the hotel. Also take time to make your cat comfortable with a new place, and check for hazards. You don't know what's lying around. Like if you have a cat, for example, that chews cables, make sure that nothing is plugged in, right? Also make sure that you're around when the room is clean. I mean, some of the hotels are actually asking for you to be around when the room is cleaned. But if you're not around and the room is clean, the cat may run out, and you don't want that. So at least put the do not disturb sign on the door if you leave, if there is no arrangement with hotel. Right? Now, moving with cats. If you have well bonded with your cat and she is bound to you and not just the environment, do not leave her behind. And I cannot, stress that enough. Do not leave her behind, because it would be really cruel to the cat. Leave her behind, and you really don't want to do that. So let me stop the share. There we go. Now, the better you're bonded, the less problems you will have. And that is why bonding with a cat is so important. Because if you are bonded with a cat really well, then you may have no trouble at all. I had no trouble with Chin Chin or Gizmo in the later moves. In the first moves, it was just a little bit difficult to calm them down initially because I didn't know where they were. So they were looking around, they were going, kind of freaking out. But then after 3 or 4 hours, they were totally fine in that new environment. And what I did as well is I put one of their favorite blankets in the side, or I think I took my bed with me or whatever. And they knew that is the new place. And then they sat down on it, and then it was fine. Now, it depends on how well you're bonded with your cat when you can let her out. So people usually recommend to leave the cat inside for 3 to 4 weeks so that the cat doesn't run away and may never be found again. But I found if you're fully bonded, with my cats at least, I could let them out after 3 or 4 hours. I just had to make sure that they were fine in the new environment and that they were not afraid of the new environment and didn't try to get out of the new environment anymore. And then I could open the door and could tell them, do you want to come out with me? And then they would kind of, tentatively look out, and then I would walk around with them over the environment and show them, okay, this is the environment and this is where it goes back. And then I would pick them up and bring them back in again so that they would see that this is the home, right? But if you have never done this before and you don't know how your cat will react, 3 or 4 hours is probably not for you, but it depends what kind of relationship you have with your cat. So just make sure that the cat is really comfortable inside and not afraid anymore. And then, play it by ear. If you're not sure, leave her inside for 3 or 4 weeks. And one of the things that I always use, apart from the blanket or the sleeping accessories that she loves, is I use Fairly-Way. That's a product, and I'm not getting any money for this, but it's a product that I really love. It's Fairly-Way. It's pheromones of the cats, basically. And you can have it as a diffuser, you can have it as a spray. And it really helps both with the traveling and the moving to make sure that your cat is comfortable. Because it's some sort of pheromone in their on their face. When they kind of put their nose against things, that's where where they put the pheromone in order to feel comfortable. And if you put more into the air, then they will feel comfortable and they're going to be calming down sooner. You can also use that when you go to the vet. A lot of vets have it in their treatment room, actually. And also, if you go and move somewhere else, do think about how that new place is going to be for the cat. It's the same thing as for children, make it safe. So one of the things, you want to take a look at, is there a busy street outside? If there is a busy street outside, you either want to take a look at something else, or you may want to take some precautions, especially if your cats are not used to that, because that could be a very early death for them. Even with that not so busy street, it was a very early death for Carter, and I would always make sure now that I know that they're okay. Toxic substances, buildings, materials, or rat poison used nearby. Take a look at it and take precautions. One of the precautions could be that you, for example, put a fence somewhere in that direction and just make sure that the cat goes the other way. I have that in the house here. They are not allowed to go outside onto the parking lot because there's a neighbor who always drives in very quickly. And instead, I let them out in the back where they can go in the park. So there's really no reason for them to try to get around to the parking lot, and it's much safer. So the neighbors, how are they like? Are they tolerant to cats? I found out when I moved here, I initially thought that they were tolerant to cats. And then the neighbor next door just mentioned that he hated cats and he thought that they were destroying all his plants. And he had just chased the cat over the fence into a roof, and the roof was a glass and it was just destroyed, and he doesn't know what happened with the cat. And I just thought, oh my God, I just kind of freaked out. But because I had already had some bad experiences before with, with letting, the cats out with neighbors and stuff, I had actually bought a product called Perfect Fence, and this is what it looks like. Let me share the screen. Hold on, let me just share the screen again with you. You can't see that right now. Share. Here you go. Okay, you should be able to see that now. Put this up. There you go. So here, you see these things up here? You can hardly see them. You have to actually really take a look at the picture. But that actually means that the cat can't get out, because the cat can get up here, and then because it goes backwards, it falls down again. And the same thing is freestanding here. This is the pole. You can hardly see it against the trees. And there is a fence here. And the fence also goes into the ground. Basically, initially, I think it was made for deer and to keep rodents out. And that is why it also goes under the ground. And I, for example, have never had any rats in my house, although the neighbor had them, because I have that fence. And when the cat can basically climb to up here, and then it kind of falls down here. So it is a beautiful way to keep a cat safe without really affecting the landscape too much. And what I did in my house, for example, on the side, I put some climbers up here. You know, I had some beautifully blooming climbers up here. So this is something that you can do. Let me just go back again. Right, does your cat chew cables? You know, my Gizmo, he used to chew cables, so I had to make sure that cables are not lying around live. And also, what wild animals is the cat not used to? Like, are there coyotes or are there snakes? I can remember Jerry coming in Vancouver all of a sudden, and she had this long snake in her snout. And I didn't know what kind of snake it was. I didn't know if it was poisonous or what it was. Well, it was this huge big black thing that was wiggling around, and you know, she just dropped it on the floor. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I was just really happy that she hadn't been bitten or anything. And it was everything was fine. That snake was actually not poisonous. I brought it outside, and it was fine and everything. But you know, do a little bit of research of what kind of animals are around where you're going. There were also bears and everything. But anyway. So, and take time with her. Some cats will grieve for the old place, but they grieve for you even more. So some will be perfectly happy where you're going, as long as you are there. Some of them mine were, and some of mine grieved for the old place a little bit. Give them plenty of love and assurance, and I'm just speeding up a little bit because the webinar, I think, is going to be over in a second. And it may actually become a bonding experience for you and the cat. So after this webinar, I will send you, and it can also be, you know, really give all the animals a really new lease of life, which is really beautiful. First impressions count. Don't leave your cat to the end, right? Just make sure that you take care of her and then you unpack. All right. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to send them to info@seekchange.co. That's info@seek for seeking and change like changing something.co, not co.uk, just co. And or visit us on our website, www.nevelle.co.uk. And if there is a reason why you're moving, is for example that you're moving, that you have a job change, or you want a job change, or you don't really know, you know, you may have lost your job, or you're about to lose your job, and you don't really know which direction to go to. We actually have a product, we have a book, which you can see here, but we also have a product of video series, which kind of shows you a system, which makes it easier, better, and faster to get to the other side, to find out what your new mission could be like. Because a lot of people have never really done something completely new before. They learned their first job and then went into that first job and had that career. But nowadays, these jobs go away. Automation, robots are taking over, you know, digitalization, all of these things are going to be massively disrupting the workplace. So a lot of people will have to find something new, and they don't have experience with this. As it happens, I do have a lot of experience with it. So I put a course together of what helped me during the years. And it is a system that will basically show you all the things that you need to take a look at to show you which direction you want to go into. And it starts with just finding the new mission. How do you find it? How do you know what could fulfill you instead of just being another job that's a 9 to 5 that you hate? But really the thing that you maybe should have done in the first place or always wanted to do, but you kind of have forgotten about it. How do you discover that? And then the next thing is, how do you work yourself into it? How do you find the right education for it? What exactly should you be doing? Where exactly should you be looking? Is it just at Harvard and universities like that you can look, or can you look in other places? You know, how do you approach this? So we're giving you different options there. And then how do you plan on getting into it? When do you start? I mean, I would suggest if you see a huge big wave coming towards you, that you start now. You don't wait until the wave is cresting and you feel the first drops falling on your head. But the planning also, we also cover that. And then the execution and the evaluation afterwards. And there are sub-steps for all of these 6 steps. We call them the 6 E's. And they're sub-steps. And if you leave out one of these sub-steps, it could have real consequences. Consequences that means that you will not get where you need to go and you will be really upset at the end of your life. While if you actually do this, you may end up being really happy about your new life, and it may be the best thing that happened to you that your job went away. So take a look at this. You will find it on our website, www.nivelle.co.uk. That's Nivelle, it's like Neville, just all E's, NEVELLE.co.uk. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will find a free webinar, which gives you an introduction to the course. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you will find the version where you can sign up for the course. If you sign up for a month, you can download all the courses, all the course materials, and you can cancel it within that month. Or you can keep looking of what else shows up. All right? So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time again. And I wish you all the best. If you have any questions, send them to info.seekchange.co, and we will endeavor to get back to you within 48 hours. And I wish you all the best for the cat. And well, we'll send a PDF out to you as well with best practices. And this PDF is also recommended by the local vet that I have here, just to make sure that I don't forget anything that I actually take for granted because I don't even think about it anymore. I've taken a look at what they recommend, and I will send you, a summary of that as well. Okay? So thank you for joining us, and see you again.